Midwest Whitetail is brought to you by Hoyt Archery, Fuse Accessories, Realtree, Muddy Outdoors, Cabela's, Rocket Broadheads, Frigid Forage, Trophy Rock, Easton Arrows, RTP Outdoors, Non-Typical Wildlife Solutions, Ozonics, Wilderness Athlete, Grizzly Coolers, Redneck Hunting Blinds, and Nikon.
Welcome to the show this week. Bill's out of town right now. He's up in the Boundary Waters with his son Andrew on a fishing trip, and they're having a lot of fun up there. So we're taking over the show today, and I'm out in the field and just replenished a trophy rock in an area where I was hunting a big buck last fall. In fact, this very spot is where I started getting pictures of him last summer. So replenished the rock, put up a muddy trail camera, and even though it's late May, I'm hoping to get pictures of this buck as he develops throughout the spring and summer. So we got a lot of information for you on the show today. We're going to talk about trail camera tactics. But first, we're going to catch up with Korey Wolfe in Missouri. A few seasons back, he showed how he created a slightly different variation on the poor man style food plot. It's a really simple way of doing it. He created this one in late summer and had a huntable plot just a few weeks later. He's had a lot of success over the years using this tactic, so he's going to show us how he creates food plots in the timber close to bedding areas.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to Midwest Whitetail, the Great Plains Show. It's early September, just a few weeks away from Missouri's archery opener, and I'm out here in the woods creating another micro plot, a little poor man plot, if you will. It's what Bill calls them. These things have been awesome for us over the years. We've had a lot of success hunting in these micro plots, and today I'm going to show you what I do in order to have a great food plot to hunt over this fall. Well, first and foremost, the reason I picked this spot over other spots around here was because it's real easy to get in and out along the edge of this field. We've got a cornfield over here on our neighbors, feeds lots and lots of deer, and back here behind us we have a big bedding area, and there's lots of deer that use it. Lots of deer that are going to pile through, go right up through here, pick on my food plot before they go out into the big cornfield to feed at night. So after you've picked your spot, you have a way in and out, the first thing that I do is come in with a weed eater with a metal blade and take everything down, all the way down to the dirt. Cut all the stems off as low as you can. This is going to be very helpful later on whenever you're trying to run the rake by hand. Any of those stobs are going to get caught up on the rake, and it's going to make your task of raking in the seed a whole lot easier if they're all the way down to the soil. So after you're done with the weed eating, it's time to go through and pick up all the sticks and any of the debris inside the food plot. Now, in my opinion, it's not important to get rid of every last stick. You're going to drastically reduce the organic matter in your soil, and that's something that your plants are going to really need, especially several years from now if you keep putting your food plot in the same location. Now, if you watch Bill's show, you'll see that he goes in and he rakes off the leaves, or he burns off the leaves, and he rakes the soil to have a good seed bed. I usually skip that step because I'm planting a different seed. If you have clover, you need good seed to soil contact. But if you're planting any of the cereal grains, wheat, rye, oats, Frigid Forage has the autumn quick plot with lots of oats in it. That doesn't need great seed to soil contact, especially if you increase your seeding rate. And on a small plot like this, I'll put approximately 300 pounds to the acre. So that would be about 50 pounds of seed on a small plot like this. So after you've broadcast your seed, it's time to get your rake and rake in the seed. Just to get it underneath some leaves, anything to help germinate that seed. You know, it can be under a layer of leaves. It should sprout right up through it. So just to recap, this is the way we do our microplots. There's lots of variations. There's lots of ways you can be successful doing this. We have had a lot of luck in our microplots over the years. If you follow some of these guidelines, maybe you too can have luck over a microplot this fall.
Kingbirds are having a fight there. As you can see, I came up to the food plot here and checked it out. Clover is doing nicely. I frost seeded this back in late March. It'll probably need some maintenance later this summer, but I'm really happy with how it's coming in. On the next segment, Aaron's going to talk about how he utilized a trail camera a couple seasons back to help him understand how these bucks were moving through this area, and eventually he was able to harvest one of the deer that he was getting on that trail camera. But first, I want to talk quickly about another way that we use trail cameras, and I would consider this more of a long-term approach. It's not necessarily gathering information that you're going to use that season to help you kill the deer, but more learning about the deer that are in the area, and more specifically how they move through an area, and applying that information to future seasons. And we do this a lot on public land because there's really so many locations that we find on maps and Scout that look like they're going to be good, but we may not have time to get around to hunting them that fall. And often we're putting these cameras in areas that are hard to access, that you're not going to be going in and checking the camera frequently, oftentimes close to bedding areas or between bedding areas. And the nice thing is with the muddy trail cameras, the batteries will last the entire season. I'm putting them up in late September, early October, and then going and grabbing them sometime in December or January when the season is over. Last fall, I ran 3 different cameras with this approach. Of those 3 locations, I only ended up hunting one of them. I happened to go back in to hang a stand in that area, checked the camera, saw a good buck on there, and decided to invest some time in that spot. As I hunted it throughout October and November, I saw plenty of deer activity, but mostly does and fawns and small bucks. By the end of the year, I had pulled all the cameras out, and now it was time to go back and look at what the trail cameras had to say. So as I looked at the trail camera pictures from this location and started looking at the weather, I started to notice a trend, at least for older bucks, 3.5-year-old or older bucks. 10 out of 13 times a mature buck passed in front of the camera during daylight was on southerly type winds. And in that area, I was hunting it and I felt that it set up best for northerly type winds. So that was an interesting revelation. So it's not surprising that there was some kind of wind-related correlation to when bucks move through there. And that's definitely going to influence the way I hunt it next fall. So that was some really useful information from that site. Now another camera that I checked also provided some useful information, but kind of with a different result. Now in this particular spot, it was hard to access through public land. But what I found is that there was a number of squirrel hunters that were coming in throughout the month of October that must have been coming in off of private land. I still got pictures of a number of bucks throughout the fall, but nothing of real size and nothing real consistent. So my takeaway from this spot was that I wouldn't say it's completely written off, but probably not an area that I'm going to invest a lot of time in. There's hunting pressure from squirrel hunters, other deer hunters. They're coming in off of private land, and the whole object of this spot was that it would have very little hunting pressure because it's hard to access through public. But again, without having that camera running there throughout the season, I wouldn't have that information. So anyways, we found this to be a useful way of utilizing trail cameras. It may not help us kill a deer immediately that season, but we've definitely gathered a lot of useful information, getting an idea of what bucks are in the area, hopefully seeing what bucks made it through the season, and then also by taking the time to relate weather information to your trail camera data can help you really learn a lot about how and when mature bucks especially move through that area. And it can really help contribute to success in seasons to come.
Well, Greg just touched on long-term trail camera strategy. Now I'm going to talk about short-term trail camera strategy. And we use both of these on every property that we hunt. And they're both very valuable. We're out on public land today putting up a few muddy cameras in some easy to access locations. And this is usually where you're going to find us putting up cameras during the season. And the first place to start on public land is anywhere fairly close to the parking lots or from the access areas. There's always people in there walking on these trails, they're walking these field edges and stuff, so the deer are used to that human scent. They won't come out there during the daylight, obviously, but they're still going to show up there at some point. So anytime we find a big community scrape along one of these field edges, it may only be a few hundred yards from the car. We'll try to get a camera up in that area. We're not just scouting for deer in these spots, we're also trying to judge the amount of human pressure that this area is getting. But by putting them over these community scrapes or other high traffic areas like trails or creek crossings leading in to these food sources, we can judge what kind of bucks are in the area. And that's what we're looking for in a short-term trail camera strategy. We're trying to find out if this area has got a mature buck on it. So many times we run our trail cameras and we get pictures of mature bucks in October at 3 a.m., 12 o'clock, 1 a.m., and we just deduce that to them being nocturnal. And many times that's not the case. They're just old, they're lethargic, they don't move very far during the day, but they do move. As you saw from the buck nest hunt last year, those bucks were up out of their beds a good hour, hour and a half before dark. However, they only made it about 200, 300 yards from that area before end of legal shooting light. If you've got a trail camera 500, 600 yards away from that bedding area, over a scrape or a trail or whatever, you may not get those bucks until the middle of the night because they just don't move very far throughout the day. But they do move, and that's why finding the bedding areas is the most crucial thing you can do. Once you locate those, then you can figure out the trails exiting the bedding. You can follow those trails out to these areas and start running your short-term trail cameras over these spots away from the bedding where they're more used to human scent that they're going to be using in the middle of the night. This enables us to be non-intrusive, wait until we're getting a buck on camera, and then go in for the kill on these bedding areas. And that's why many times the first time in these spots is so productive for us on public land. We used this strategy back in 2015 on a buck that we call the decoy buck. Zach Fehrenbaugh and I killed him in the middle of November coming to a decoy. But what we didn't get a chance to touch on during the hunt was how trail cameras played a large role in killing this deer. This buck actually came out of a creek crossing where we had one of these muddy cameras set up, and it was a high traffic area for humans and deer. So they're used to human scent in that spot. Now, we had the camera set up there and we'd been checking it every couple of weeks, and we're picking this buck up in the middle of the night over and over again on the same trail. These mature bucks, if they're one thing, it's habitual. And over, we're picking up this old 9-pointer, this decoy buck, walking through this trail, headed up into this big timber. Now it's in the middle of the night, but we're not necessarily worried about that, and I'll talk about why in a second. But this deer was showing up. We know that he's living in this area and that he's obviously interested in this doe bedding area because he's going up in there throughout the entire month of October. Come November, he must have found a hot doe in that bedding area, and he was actually using the same exact trail that we got him on camera multiple times with that doe as he came out into that field. But the key here is finding the buck, and short-term trail camera strategy allowed us to do that. Now, the second thing that you need to do, aside from setting cameras out, is spending tons of time scouting these properties, whether it's public land, private land, whatever. You've got to learn the terrain, the bedding areas, the feeding areas, the trails between the two. All that stuff needs to be done prior to the season. That's why we preach scouting in the spring and late winter so much. But because of our prior scouting, many times we can actually figure out where that deer is living at. In this specific situation, we just knew that there was a bunch of does up in this bedding area that this deer was going up into. He was probably running up through there, making a loop, checking a few scrapes, and then going back to his bedroom that he was using throughout most of the month of October, someplace away from that human scent where he felt most secure. But in the rut, when one of those does came in, he'd obviously moved in there with her. But a lot of times we've got these areas pre-scouted. We already know where the bedding is. So when we get photos of a deer on a creek crossing like this or a scrape, we can determine which direction that he came from. Whether it's in the middle of the night or not, we don't care, because that deer is likely bedding far away from that spot. You know, he's probably up and moving during the day still. He's just bedding so far away from that camera that he's not getting there until the middle of the night. So once we get photos of a mature buck in these spots that we've pre-scouted already, we can go deep in there to those bedding areas in October and start hunting these bucks. But I think if you utilize both of these trail camera strategies on your property, it's going to help you have more success this season. But that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode. We appreciate you joining us. We'll see you back here next Monday for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail.